Good afternoon, and welcome to the William G. McGowan Theater here at the National Archives. I'm David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here, whether you're here in the theater or joining us on our YouTube station. And a special welcome to our viewers on C-SPAN. Today's discussion, A Tiger Among Us, the story of Valor in Vietnam's A Shau Valley, is one of several programs related to our Remembering Vietnam exhibit, which you can see upstairs in the Lawrence F. O'Brien Gallery. Before we get started with today's program, I'd like to encourage you to return for two other programs coming up soon in this theater. On Friday, July 20th at noon, we'll present a selection of archival films from the motion picture holdings of the National Archives. This will be the third program in our film series relating to the exhibit Remembering Vietnam. And next week on Tuesday, July 24th at noon, journalist and author Kate Anderson Brower will discuss her latest book, First in Line, Presidents, Vice Presidents, and the Pursuit of Power, which explores the lives and roles of 13 modern vice presidents. And a book signing will follow that program. Check our website or sign up at the table outside the theater to get email updates. You'll also find information about other National Archives programs and exhibits. And another way to get more involved in the National Archives is to become a member of the National Archives Foundation. The foundation supports our education and outreach activities, and there are applications for membership in the lobby. Now I ask all Vietnam veterans or United States veterans who served on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces at any time during the period of November 1st, 1955 to May 15th, 1975 to stand and be recognized. As you exit the McGowan Theater after this program, National Archives staff and volunteers will present you with the Vietnam Veteran lapel pin. On the back of the pin is embossed, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you." The United States of America Vietnam War Commemoration is a national initiative, and the lapel pin is the nation's lasting memento of thanks. As I mentioned earlier, this program is related to our special exhibit, Remembering Vietnam. For this exhibit, our curatorial staff combed through National Archives records here and across the country to find documents that tell the stories recounted in the 12 episodes of the exhibit. One of the most powerful features of the exhibit is hearing the voices of veterans giving visitors a first-hand account of their experiences during the war. Since the exhibit opened last November, we've heard from many veterans here sharing their own stories on this stage and even from the audience. Today we're privileged to hear from Vietnam veteran and Medal of Honor recipient Bennie Adkins. Commander Sergeant Major Bennie G. Adkins was drafted into the United States Army on December 5, 1956 at the age of 22 from Waurika, Oklahoma. After attending airborne school, he volunteered for Special Forces in 1961 and served with them for more than 13 years. While in the Special Forces, he deployed to the Republic of Vietnam for 3 non-consecutive tours in 1963, 1965 to 66, and 1971. During that second tour in March 1966, a North Vietnamese force attacked Sergeant Adkins' small unit at Camp A Shau. It was during that engagement that Adkins distinguished himself in actions for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest award bestowed on an individual serving in the armed forces of the United States. After Vietnam, Adkins served as first sergeant for the Army Garrison Communications Command in Arizona and then attended the Army Sergeant Major Academy in El Paso, Texas. After graduation, Adkins served with the Special Forces at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then led training at Fort Sherman's Jungle School in the Panama Canal Zone. He retired from the Army in 1978. Adkins earned his bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees from Troy State University. He also established the Adkins Accounting Service, Inc., serving as its CEO for 22 years, and taught night classes at Alabama's Southern Union Junior College for 10 years and at Auburn for 6 years. Adkins' many awards and decorations include the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star medaled with 1 bronze oak leaf cluster, and the Purple Heart with 2 bronze oak leaf clusters. Today's moderator, Katie Lamar Jackson, is a writer, editor, and photographer with more than 30 years of experience as a journalist, book author, communicator, and public relations and marketing specialist. She has worked for or with a wide variety of clients, such as CNN, Ortho Books, the Southern Progress Corporation, the Ladies Professional Golf Association, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and major public universities, as well as myriad regional and national magazines, web developers, publishers, public and private agencies, and nonprofits. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bennie Adkins and Katie Lamar Jackson.
How are you?
I'm good. We're under the bright lights.
There you go.
So I think the thing we're supposed to do is talk, and at a book talk. And first of all,
well, I love that talking. Yes.
so we spent a lot of time when we were working on this book in your living room talking.
What did when you anticipate? Did it take what, about 2.5 years to do that?
2.5 years. Mm-hmm.
And what I asked you to do, and you were very capable in doing this when we began, is that I wanted everything in the book to be true and accurate, and the only changes that were made were some of the other Americans that were present said, you know, I had some dates and times wrong, mm-hmm. So that was the corrections that I seen you make.
Right, right. So we did have the opportunity for you and I to have these long discussions day after day after day, and I think I asked you the same questions over and over again. You probably got tired of that. But we also had the opportunity to interview the other men who were still alive from the battle, who had survived the battle, and that was really important to you, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes, because like I said, it's not my story. It was the thing that there was 17 Americans there in that major battle, and all 17 were wounded. With unfortunately 5 paid the ultimate price with their life.
Mm-hmm. So let's start at the beginning. You were born on a dark and stormy night? No.
Yes.
Maybe a cold night.
Yeah. Anyone with my reputation would have to be born on a dark and stormy night. Yes. And I was born in Waurika, Oklahoma, and we were farmers, and I loved the farm life. But I guess I was decided after high school that I would begin college, and I believe I was more interested in the good-looking girls than I were in the academics. So my father decided that, you know, he might be wasting his money on me for a while in college. And once I dropped out of college, and I was not unemployed for long because I was drafted right into the military. Once I was no longer in college, I was become a soldier.
Right. And as I recall, you had some fairly nice deployments early on. I think you and Elvis hung out together a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you what, no, the military decided of all things that I was going to be a clerk typist. Well, let's face it, there's not a thing wrong with being a clerk typist. However, that didn't quite fit my needs. And so the Army decided my first trip that they would send me to Germany. And I spent a little time in Germany, and this happened to be the time that Elvis Presley traveled through, and I was working there as a clerk typist. So one of the duties I had to do was to fingerprint Elvis Presley when he come into the country. Yeah.
So when you got through there, though, I think you might have been a little bored. Is that right?
Bored completely, and so I said that clerk typist is not going to work. So I think I need to try to become a little better soldier, and said I think I want to go with the infantry, and I was assigned with the infantry at the infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, and working with the basic training unit. And in this basic training unit, my duty at that period of time was doing an infiltration course. And this is a type of course where they're firing live ammunition over your head, but it's so safe that, you know, the machine guns is locked into a position that they're firing way above your head. And I did this for some time, and kind of become bored with that also. And heard of an organization at that time frame called the Army Special Forces. And I decided at that time frame that I might just try this, and I had to volunteer for Special Forces, had to volunteer to be a paratrooper, had to volunteer again for the Army to do this, and I was selected to try to become a Special Forces member at that time frame. Mm-hmm. And this required about a year and a half of very extensive training, not only the physical aspects, but the mental aspects also.
Right, right. So you get this training, you end up in Vietnam for the first tour, which was relatively mild.
And the first, the first tour, it was relatively mild to me. I was just wounded one trip, and that first trip. So yes, that was very mild. And I spent a little time in Vietnam, and this was in early 1963. And like I said, it was relatively calm and at that time period. Yes.
Right. But then you came back in 1966. Well, really, maybe 65.
1965 and 66, I was back in Vietnam again. And in that time period, I was, it was not so calm. And one of the positions that, there's a kind of a story goes with this, and my sergeant major come after me and said, did you know, said, I'm going to make you my C-Team intelligence sergeant. And now keep in mind that this was the organization where you got to sleep in real beds and had real food to eat and this type of thing. And I said, you know, I can do this. Well, cleared post and reported to the sergeant major about 2 days later. And he said, Ben, I've got bad news for you. He said, old Sergeant Earl Petty just got hit out at the A Shau Valley and said, I'm gonna have to send you out there. Well, they sent me to this location, and it was probably the worst in Vietnam at that time period.
Right, and the location was the problem, correct? It's where not only was it remote, but it was also surrounded by hills and sort of hard to defend.
It was absolutely a mountainous country, and triple canopy, all types of all types of insects, all types of reptiles, and was the major infiltration route for the North Vietnamese that was moving into the South Vietnamese country.
Mm-hmm. Right. And if I recall, it was also a bit understaffed even when you got there.
It was understaffed, and the indigenous troops that we had really didn't want to be there, and we found out at a later time that many of them had were petty criminals that they had sent them to us at that location. They took them out of the Saigon jails at that time and sent them to us, and we didn't know that, but we found out the hard way that some of them were supporting the North Vietnamese rather than us, yes.
Mm-hmm. And this camp was different also from some of the others you'd been in on the previous tour, because the affiliations of the indigenous troops were different. The Montagnards and there were fewer of those.
That's right. Yes, there were not only the Montagnard personnel, but also the some of the South Vietnamese soldiers were of different ethnic groups, and for instance, some of the training that we were doing, sometimes they would have to work with as many as 2 and 3 interpreters to do some teaching.
Right. So there you all are, and you start to notice that maybe there's some activity outside the edge of the camp?
We didn't have any problem with that. There was activity outside the camp at all times, and we received, we had two prisoners, and they come in and told us at a certain time that we were going to be attacked, and that there was a large force to include the division size of the North Vietnamese troops that were going to attack this Special Forces camp when the weather was so bad that we could not receive air support.
And that weather came a little earlier than expected.
It was 2 or 3 days earlier, and like I said, they did attack at that time period, and we were involved in a battle with for 38 hours, and we were under constant contact for that 38-hour period of time.
Right. So the Americans in the camp included you and your Special Forces team, but also the Mike Force team.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about the Mike Force or the
well,
two
the
teams?
The Mike Force was a reaction that they sent to reinforce teams, and at the present time we had a team of, our 12-man team was down to 9, and with the Mike Force they sent one replacement into us, made the 10th American there, and with that there was 7 Mike Force that come in, and they arrived 3 days before the attack.
So they were pretty fresh on the ground before.
They were, and this is what they did, was support other troops during a battle this way.
Right. So the battle goes on for 38 hours, and a lot of casualties.
Yes.
And then the loss of a lot of men, both on their side and on your side, as well as the Americans. And you were manning, as I recall, a gun that was a mortar.
Well, yes, a mortar position. Yes, at that time period, my position was a mortar. It was an 81 millimeter mortar, and this was an indirect fire weapon. Also, at that time frame, I utilized not only a machine gun, I utilized two or three rifles, and I had a weapon that today probably wouldn't be authorized to utilize, but this was a shotgun that I had taken this pump shotgun. I'd cut the barrel off to about this long, and I'd cut the handle off of it, and basically made a weapon that would work. And if you were here and say with a door about that distance, double-arc buckshot would blow that door open with that weapon. And this was ideal with the short, the close combat that we had with this. And also I utilized, unfortunately, used a lot of hand grenades.
Right. So I know that all of you had already decided that you weren't going to be captured, that you were going to fight to the end.
Yeah, this was something, number one, we knew what was happening with this, and what had been happening with especially with the Special Forces soldiers. If they captured one, they were normally executed on the spot. So we'd made up our mind. No, we were not going to be captured, and this was something that all the living there had decided that no capture.
So the odds of you all being able to even survive an onslaught like this seem to me just remarkable. But you've credited the fact that you all were so well trained.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like that this was the key to it, and like I said, I spent better than a year and a half in training prior to this to become Special Forces qualified. And what this required is not only the language training and the training, the cultural training, but we had to learn to assemble and disassemble every weapon, for instance, that was in the small arms of the world. And rather than just assemble and disassemble the weapons, we had to become qualified with them. And we were trained, and not only there, but we were trained in operations and intelligence. We were trained in communications, and with the communications, we're talking about AM and FM radio, and we did International Morse code. We were instrumental in developing the birth system that we utilized in the International Morse code. And this was where when you were on a key, you would slow this down, and the birth system would send the message at about 200 words per minute, and a receiver could slow it down at the speed that you needed to receive this. And the reason behind this was that the enemy was using direction finding equipment, and once you hit that key, you better start dodging, because they're going to send some artillery in on you.
Mm-hmm. So when you fight for 38 hours and the call comes in to evacuate, talk about that evacuation and what happened after that.
Well, unfortunately, this was Many of the indigenous troops said during the battle, let me talk just a little bit about this, and we had one company of the indigenous personnel that decided during the battle that they would rather fight with the North Vietnamese. And they just changed sides with, and this created a major problem. So therefore, the enemy come right into our camp this way because they had help with the local troops helping them with this. And keep in mind now that during that battle, that about 70 or 80% of the friendly troops had been wounded or killed during this battle.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're evacuating, and they've sent in helicopters to evacuate you, but some of those were waved off, or some shot down.
Well, unfortunately, my understanding that they put 18 helicopters in the air to make an evacuation of the camp, and during only 8 of the helicopters made it. 10 were shot down. So when the order became for us to evacuate the camp, myself and the executive officer, the helicopters that did landed outside the camp, and myself and the executive officer went back into the camp to get one of the wounded Americans that was on the stretcher. So when we come out, we didn't have a ride, so we had to hit the jungle. And unfortunately, the American that was on the stretcher, short time we were in the jungle, succumbed. Didn't survive his wounds. And we were, I was kind of fortunate in the fact that, like I said, my favorite weapon, the shotgun, I happened to have the little HT1 FM radio that we utilized in camp. Now keep in mind that this radio, you could talk about the distance of this room in ideal conditions, but however, this one I had the antenna shot off of it. So I stood in water, took my shotgun and made an antenna and communicated with an airplane, someone in an airplane. They sent a helicopter in to pick us up. We rapidly cut enough place that one helicopter could land in the jungle, and they shot the helicopter down. Well, there was a couple of the helicopter crew that was wounded in the crash when the helicopter was shot down, and they lifted those wounded out. We sent them out on strings. The strings, that's the nylon rope that's under that's attached to the helicopter, and sent them out on strings, and we had to go again. The North Vietnamese were chasing us again, and so had to spend another night in the jungle, and this happened to be the night that we started hearing a noise, then eyes, and like I said, we were in the South Vietnamese-Laotian border, right in the A Shau Valley. And that noise that we heard happened to be about a 400-pound Indonesian tiger. This tiger stalked us. It had been, unfortunately, that tiger had been feeding off the bodies and so forth of the dead. And that tiger stalked us that night. And the North Vietnamese soldiers was more afraid of the tiger than they were of us. They backed off enough to give us a room to get away.
And the tiger didn't bother you all, did it?
That tiger saved her life. So I love cats today.
Well, so you did finally get out of that jungle.
Yes, we did. Then, like I said, the weather broke enough that they could send some aircraft in. They did get us out of the jungle, and in a short time period, like I said, they determined that I had 18 body wounds from that contact. Spent a couple of days on the hospital ship, and short time later, I was in another camp doing the same thing again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not much rest for the weary, is there?
No, not at all, not at all. Look.
So is after that you were nominated for the Medal of Honor after that battle?
And that is correct. I was recommended at that time for the Medal of Honor from that battle, and I received at that time period the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest award.
And you were proud to wear that, weren't you?
Oh, well, I'm proud to wear. I wore that for 48 years with pride and distinction, yes.
Right. So let's talk about the Medal of Honor, and when you did find out that 48 years later this was happening again.
Well, after I knew that I had a young captain at that time that was our commander, and he was severely wounded in that, and received a Distinguished Service Cross himself and retired as a senior colonel. And he just wouldn't let it go. He had recommended me initially for the Medal of Honor, and didn't like the idea that it was not approved, so he stayed with it, and 48 years later, I received a telephone call one day from the Pentagon, and said that at a certain time there would be a telephone call from a high government official. Well, when the telephone rang at that time period, it happened to be the President of the United States. And he said he had approved the Medal of Honor for me based upon the declassification of many of the activities and some new statements that had come in with this. And said, now the difficult part was this. See, I had a wife and daughter that was there, and the personnel in the Pentagon put a gag order on me. They said this can't be disseminated until it's someone here in the Pentagon tells. And with a wife and daughter, couldn't talk about it for about a month and a half or so. That was very difficult, yes.
So the actual, when you received the medal from the President and then went on to the Pentagon, talk a little bit about what that ceremony was like, and also who was there with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was fortunate enough for this that had families and guests of about somewhere between 80 and 90 people that attended the ceremony with me in the White House, and the reception was great. The President and it was very cordial and so forth, and and awarding the medal, and then the following day I was over in the Pentagon with the Secretary of Defense, and this was this was when they put my photograph in the Hall of Heroes there in the Pentagon. And this was a very touching ceremony also. And then the following day I was over in the Capitol building with the member of Congress from our state.
Mm-hmm. Right. You've talked about that when you wear this medal, it's not for yourself.
The medal, I wear it, it is for the other 16 Special Forces soldiers that were in that battle with me. And it's so very humbling to this day to wear it, based upon the fact that from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the war on terror, there's been better than 30 million have served this country with honor and distinction. And today there's 72 living Medal of Honor recipients. And to be one of those is super, super humbling.
When we were walking in the building today, there was a young man who wanted to shake your hand, and he had never met a living Medal of Honor recipient before. He must have been in the military at the current time, but it was not in uniform. But that happens a lot, doesn't it, where people recognize this medal and realize what it means, and then there are some people who don't.
It changed my life to such a point that I travel all over the country. I'm speaking. I had the pleasure of speaking at some major football game. I think one, there was about 110,000 inside the stadium and about 400,000 wanting tickets trying to get in. And I think probably something that I probably enjoyed more than anything else was a pre-kindergarten class. Mm-hmm. And I think some of the pre-kindergarten students had been coached enough that they asked me a couple of questions, and one of them asked me, said, "Why is there war?" And I said, "I just can't answer that." Mm-hmm. So, but this is the life that I live now, and I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for, hopefully, it will change the way of life for some young person.
Mm-hmm. Right. So when you got back from Vietnam, you actually did a third duty there with the Studies and Observation Group, but when you got back from those tours, you found that you were not welcome back home.
That it was a difficult time, mm-hmm. Yes.
Right.
That is correct, yes.
And so finding a job when you retired was also difficult, is that correct?
That was right. So with that, finding work as a veteran at that time period was something that, I just developed my own business in that, mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that you've now got this foundation that you've been working on, and part of that is to help soldiers who are going through the same thing today.
Yes, I have, thankfully, like I said, when I came back, I decided to go back to school, and not only I finished my degree, but I finished a couple of master's degrees and did some postmaster's work, and eventually the school decided I needed a doctorate, so we did it and developed a business, and went ahead raising a family and attempting to and I did this for 20-something years, and at the present time I while I was doing that, I was not only operating a business, but I was doing some adjunct teaching at both a junior college and a major university also, yes.
Right. But getting that education was really important to be able to let you move from a military career to a civilian career.
To the point that it was so important to me, yes, to the point that this is what we're doing with my, I would say, my non-profit organization today, and I'm doing this with scholarships, and it looks like this year we'll probably award 25 scholarships. And then the scholarships at the present time, our board of directors has decided that it should go to the military transitioning, and I think they're going to award most of those to the Army Special Forces, and it's going to be to the enlisted personnel that are transitioning from service.
Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily any easier today than it was when you were transitioning, is it? It's a leap from military life to civilian life.
I'll tell you what, I've visited most of the Special Forces organizations today, and I'll tell you what, they're overcommitted, overworked at the present time, yes.
Right. And I know you've mentioned to me in the past that the number of people in the military compared to the number of people who are civilians in our country, there's a bit of a discrepancy there, where there are just a handful of people who are protecting the country.
At the present time, there's somewhere between 1/2 and 1% of our population that's in our military.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of sacrifice going on now as it did all those years ago.
Yes, yes. There's no doubt.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that we've got time. We now could start entertaining some questions and answers from the audience. I think I've been told that if you have a question you'd like to ask, there are microphones on the steps, and that if you possible, go to the microphones and be able to ask questions. Does anybody have any?
Thank you for this opportunity for the talk for both of you, and for you, sir, for your service and for coming to share with us, as well as you hear many times. Thank you for your service, and we welcome that you're here today. My question is, you are, as is mentioned, and you're wearing, we appreciate you wearing today, the Medal of Honor. The captain who kept with it, is this a common practice? 48 years later, he was successful, you were successful to finally be awarded for your service. But when was it that someone said you should be getting the Medal of Honor, and they started that process? What is the process from that perspective? As you mentioned, it's a humbling experience. There are many men and women who served and probably deserved just as well for their service. And there are the few that received it because of the paperwork and the other aspects that are required to receive that. I'm just curious, the perspective of, does someone come and interview you multiple times? What is your experience in regards to going down the path to ultimately receive that award?
Thank you for your question. I would say that the major factor on the determination of this was the organization that I was in. At the present time, when I was recommended for the medal in 1966, all of the awards for the Medal of Honor at that period of time from Vietnam had gone to the Army Special Forces. At the time period, there happened to be an Air Force pilot that landed his aircraft during this battle, picked up a downed pilot, and the Air Force wanted the award of the Medal of Honor. And this was a man by the name of Fisher, who was awarded the first Air Force Medal of Honor from Vietnam. and was at the action that we were in. And this was a partial reason for the delay, was the inter-service rivalry. Other reasons was the classification. We were most of the things that the Army Special Forces doing was classified, and much of it was top secret crypto work.
Just to follow up, you mentioned that you're among those that are living as well today, 78, I believe you said. Is there a camaraderie? Do you get together? Is there a group that you all, since you all share that award, is there?
I'll tell you what, we had the pleasure last night of 29 of the living Medal of Honor recipients attending the All-Star game, and that was a great group. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Again, thank you for your service. And who was the president that awarded you your Medal of Honor, and what did you think of the experience?
The president awarded me the Medal of Honor. This happened in 2014, and it was President Obama. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes. Bennie, in your book, you made mention that in the heat of the battle, you have a plan to try to escape by capturing an officer in Vietnam and going to Laos. Tell us a little bit about how you were trying to develop that action strategy to get out of their lives.
Well, this was something that each of us had some type of a plan that we're going to try to survive this, and mine was to take a North Vietnamese officer and survive going through Laos and, if necessary, all the way to Thailand with him. And this was something that I planned to do to survive. Yes, sir.
But the tiger got it.
The tiger helped. the tiger now is thankfully the tiger now is selling books that is going to do many scholarships. Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions?
Give a follow-up. You had mentioned some experience with the indigenous folks. I was curious if you had a chance after your service to go back or correspond with anybody. Were there people that you had served that were native to Vietnam that you still kept in touch with?
No, sir. I'll tell you what, there's a little story with this. See, my last trip in Vietnam, I spent a year and survived a year with the Studies and Observation Group, which is an organization that did not exist and did not exist for about 40-something years after this. And like I said, I survived that organization. And when I left the country, there happened to be a photograph of me with so much for me, dead or alive, and it said, would I like to go back to Vietnam? I do not. The warning may still be good.
Understand, thank you.
Any other questions? So, Bennie, maybe talk a little bit about Studies and Observation Group and that tour.
No,
We've got a-
I was a member of it. That's all.
That's all you
That's
wanna
all I
say.
talk about. Yes.
Right. Any other questions at the moment?
Thank you, sir. Not having served in the military, but my grandfather got 2 Silver Stars in World War I, actually. But I'm just wondering if there are certain things that you did to help yourself keep your head in all of these situations. I can only imagine, both in the fights and in the treks and in your planning. Do you have certain mantras or prayers or guiding principles? I'm just wondering how one keeps their head in that situation like you did.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's a great question, and I'll tell you what I feel like with this, sir, is that my training to become a Special Forces soldier. This is what a lot of people know as the Green Beret, and this training to this was so intense, and so if I'd really known what I was getting into, I would not have gone with Special Forces. But I had too much pride to quit. And at that time period, about 3% made it through the class that I began with. And to be one of those 3%, like I said, I was super fortunate, yes, sir. And feel like that absolutely was a training. And this not only saved my life in the Vietnam era, but post-Vietnam, I run with Special Forces all over the world. For instance, when I retired at 22 years service, I had been serviced in 177 different countries, and most of those as an uninvited guest.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, sir. Yes, sir.
May I ask, of the 17, how many still survive?
At the present time, there are 5 of us still alive, and all 5 were interviewed and have input into the book. Yes.
You said you were inserted into camps inside of Vietnam. What was your purpose there for each of these camps? Was it to?
Our purpose there was interdiction of the North Vietnamese communications and trying to stop some of the, I would say, their troops being supported into that.
So to cut off the NVA coming into.
That's correct.
Out of the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Yes.
And cut off the supply for the Viet Cong.
That is correct. Cut off some supplies and occasionally might get a few of the North Vietnamese.
Did you work with, I know some of the programs with the CIA and the Green Berets, they were kind of intermixed, but
I have heard of that organization, yes.
Can't talk about that, I'm assuming.
I think we probably have time for one more question.
Tell us a little bit about the statue that's been made in your honor.
Oh, well, it's super humbling. There is a statue made, and I think this was someone in Kansas developed this, and what this artist did with this was take the statue and put not a soldier and showing one of our Americans that had leg blown off, and this also, it has the North Vietnamese weapons, showing the North Vietnamese hand grenades. It has a copy of the dog tag of each of the 5 that paid their ultimate price, and this statue is something that is now in a park in the hometown where I was born, and they did make me a second copy that I have that travels with me some at the present time. Yes.
Bennie, I know you have said to me more than once and to other people how important family has been through this process.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, I have a great family myself. I have a wife that happened to be a wife of a Special Forces soldier, and we've been together 62 years, and she said I don't count right, that's her age. See, so, but like I said, it is absolutely important, and I've had support all the way along. At the present time, I have 2 sons living, and one son is a minister. He has a doctorate degree in theology and a doctorate in ministry. I have my other son that's with me there now that's a surgeon and a practicing physician at the present time. And I have a daughter that has graduate work, and she at the present time runs my organization for me and takes care of the paperwork for me.
Mm-hmm. So even today, you're still getting some family
today,
support.
It's still family is a necessity for me. Yes.
Right. Well, I think any other questions?
Bennie, I'm looking around and I think you may be the senior person here. What advice would you give to the young people that are sitting here that you've learned along life's way that would be something they could take away?
Number one, number one is education. Get the young people get the education and that you need to do whatever you want to do. Then try to be the best that you can be at whatever you want to do.
Well, I just want to personally thank everybody who came to listen to this talk today, and certainly to the National Archives for hosting us. It's a real honor to be here, and just amazing to be able to sit in this auditorium and be able to talk to someone like this. So thank you for coming and for being here and letting us have this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I believe we can go upstairs for...
That is correct. There is a book signing one level up at the Archives bookstore. Bennie will be up there in just a few moments to sign books. You can get them at the cash register.